Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to make an easy bakery style cake only using store-bought cake mix, icing, and sprinkles. And I know a lot of people have done this by also adding fondant or edible flowers, but I wanted to stick solely to store-bought items in order to make this a genuine elevation of store-bought cake mix and icing. So to start, I just followed the recipe on the back of the cake mix box and I added my oil, eggs, and water. Don't worry, I did not use brown water, it's just a little bit of vanilla extract in it. And I added all of this to my cake mix and then mixed until the batter formed. Once the cake batter came together, I sprayed and lined 3 8-inch cake pans with circle parchment paper pieces and then evenly distributed the cake batter amongst the 3 pans and baked them according to the directions on the back of the box. Once the cakes came out and cooled, I flipped the cakes onto a piece of plastic wrap and then placed them in the freezer for a few hours to chill so they would be easier to work with later. After a few hours, I took them out and started to assemble my cake by placing my first layer of cake onto a glass cake pan. So after I placed my first layer of cake onto my glass cake plate, I then put a layer of frosting on that and then repeated this step with the other 2 layers of cake, applying icing in between each layer and then around the whole cake when I was done. Now, just as a side point, as you could see, I didn't level off my individual cake layers and I definitely paid for that mistake later on, so I highly recommend you level off each of your cake layers before stacking them. Now, instead of just smoothing out the icing, I decided to add some texture to it, and I used the back of a spoon to create these little lines, almost like a wood pattern, all around the edge of the cake, and then I did the same thing to the top. Now, the reason I like to make textured cakes and not smooth cakes is because when you make a textured cake, it is a lot harder to see the inconsistencies and the little air bubbles as opposed to when you make a smooth cake and they stick out more, so it's a lot easier, especially for beginners, to hide little mistakes. Now, as you could see, I originally made the cake with some meringues on top, but like I mentioned before, I didn't level off each of my layers of cake, so it was a little domed on top, and I thought that looked really off with the meringues, and I also wanted this to be a cake genuinely only made out of store-bought items, so I took off the meringues and blended the icing that was under them into the darker shade of icing onto the top of my cake. Once I was happy with how the top of the cake looked, I used a 1M piping tip and created this crisscross shell border all along the edge of the cake. Then I added some more sprinkles on top of this zigzag shell border in order to finish off my cake. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you have any questions or anything you'd like to see me make next, feel free to comment down below or DM me on my Instagram at @the.brickery.